Hello and welcome to the Bottom Shelf Horror Podcast, where a couple of cheap bastards talk horror over a couple of cheap drinks. Join us today as we talk about our liquored list rankings for the Insidious franchise. I guess let's start off on a few talking points. I think Insidious is one of our favorite horror franchises.
Modern horror franchises.
Modern for sure.
I wouldn't go as far to say it's my favorite franchise.
Yeah, because I know you're a big fan of, like, Evil Dead.
Yeah, like, there's other franchises I like a lot more, as a franchise, I'm speaking. So, well, I might get into some more of those details down the line, but I think we're going to rank them from worst, least favorite to most favorite, of course, as we usually do on one of these. We save the best for last. There's only 5 installments, so there's not a ton to go through, to be honest.
Predictions, I think we're going to have our number one is the same.
Yeah, and
we're talking about for very good reasons.
Probably obvious, to be honest, but we're not going to spoil it anyways.
Yeah. From 2 to 5, I can see it going in
switching
kind of
up a
any
bit.
order.
Yeah.
I can see that. I know one installment. I think you might have a little bit higher than myself. I think you're going to have it in top 3, and I won't. Actually, maybe the other 2. I think the first couple of ones that I have is going to shock you for sure.
Okay. Well, either way, we don't know what we ranked, if you haven't put that together. We don't know what the other person ranked, because we do this separately and then come together and have the discussion about it, just because we want to be surprised, I guess. Yeah. Should we jump right into it? I guess it's worth noting that we do have some notes off screen, or at least I do. I don't know if you have notes off screen.
I have what my numbers are, and that's about
it.
Okay.
So
and the rating out of 10.
So if you see me looking down here, it's because I'm looking at my notes. So whatever. You're listening to a podcast. You're not watching to look at us. Anyways, let's start with our number 5. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first.
All right.
My least favorite Insidious movie is Insidious number 2.
Number 2, okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about why that's your least favorite?
Insidious number 2 is my least favorite for a couple of reasons. And I think it's nothing against the movie. I think I've just seen it way too much.
Okay.
Because I'm going to watch the Insidious franchise. I watched the first one, then I watched the second one. Like, the second one clearly is not as good as the first one, but we'll get to that when we get to that. And then the way that I view the other movies, I feel like there's just a lot more happening as opposed to them just being in a house and we've kind of already seen the previous events and we know what's going to happen. Right. I like the integration of Carl. I think Carl's a really unique and interesting character. But besides that's kind of where it lands flat for me. I feel like the other movies have a lot more going for it.
That's fair. So what would you rank this movie out of 10?
In saying that, I still like this movie a lot. Like, it's still an 8 out of 10 for me.
Oh shit, it's an 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of the Insidious franchise.
Yeah.
I was having a hard time putting this list together.
Yeah, damn. Okay, you like this franchise a lot more than me, I'll say. If you're ranking the lowest one, 8 out of 10.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so Insidious 2, that is a little bit surprising to me. Do you have anything else you want to add about Insidious 2? I'm not going to touch on Insidious 2 yet. It's a little bit... it's not my number 5, so...
I was going to say it's probably going to be top 3 for you, but that's A-okay. I think we can skip on to your next one here.
Sure. So we'll talk about my number 5, which is Insidious Chapter 3. I guess I'll get my rating right out of the way. It's 5.5 out of 10 for me. D tier if you're putting it in a tier list. I really didn't like the acting in this movie, especially amongst the Brenner family. That is something that took me completely out of the movie, to be honest. It felt very forced and fake.
It was a little bit corny at times.
And the dialogue felt very unnatural.
I'm going to say this now. It's my number 4.
Okay, sure.
Just so we're kind of on the same page.
Yep.
Like, it's an 8.3 out of 10. I think the main thing that I like about it is that it just shows the background of Elise and Tucker.
Yeah.
And Specs. I did like the unique form that it wasn't just attached to the Lambert family anymore.
Yes, I did like that. But again, just I didn't like the characters.
Oh yeah.
Or the acting. Like, I felt like they were written poorly, especially the dad. I hated him as a character. God, all of his interactions with especially Quinn and his son is so cringy and felt so unnatural.
After like you picking this apart, like it might be like a little bit lower. Like it might be my number 5, but I mean,
whatever, it is what it is.
Yeah.
I know they were trying to make the trauma like of their mom and wife being dead, and like the dad's a single dad now trying to raise 2 kids. I get what they were going for, but in my opinion it wasn't executed great. And that was the biggest thing that dropped my score for this movie. It just took me out of it.
I think that one interesting thing to note for the movie is that the dad wasn't like immediately dismissive, such as other dads in horror movies are, just like Josh Lambert.
That's true.
He was like right on board with her the whole time. And another thing that I really liked about this movie was the demon was interesting, I'll say. Very original. Okay. I liked the fact that it was like combined with like tar and breathing, and tried to basically convince people to kill themselves to get to his victims.
So that's another point of mine against this movie, actually, is the entity. The wheezing demon, aka the man who can't breathe. He's, in my opinion, was kind of a weak entity just because of...
Dude, at least kicked his ass pretty damn quick.
That's what I'm saying. How easy he was to defeat.
Yeah.
You just gotta fucking remove his oxygen mask and he's done.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's why, like, I didn't feel scared of him. I mean, it's hard to get scared of any of these things because we're desensitized, but I mean, I just thought too much about how easy it was to defeat him, I guess, and so that's why I didn't like him. His aesthetics and stuff were pretty cool, I guess, and it was an original idea, so I give it credit for that, for sure. But one thing I did like about this movie, like, I'm not gonna shit on it, I wasn't, like, hated myself
That's
for
all you
watching
have been doing.
That's why I'm moving. Well, you brought up the entity, I wasn't gonna bring that up yet, but some things that I did like about it is I like the idea of doing a prequel because it brought Elise back to life, basically. And it might be my favorite part of this movie, actually, is seeing Elise and her history. I empathized with her because of the loss of her husband. I felt bad for her. And I mean, I'm just a fan of Lin Shaye, so that might be a bias of mine. But I think she was the best character by far. And the struggle with the entities was more interesting than Quinn's in this movie, in my opinion. In I think almost every Insidious, she kind of steals the show, which is really weird. That considering her age, how good she is, or like how she became like a main staple when her like probably like 60s now minimum. I remember she was in the original Nightmare on Elm Street as just like a teacher. Right, yeah. Yeah, which she has a pretty good monologue then. I think she was good in the movie, had a small part, but she has a really great acting voice in my opinion. Yeah, and it's very easy to pick out. Like, you recognize it immediately. Oh, definitely. Yeah, so, just continuing on, I guess, about her history with the demons or whatever, the entities. We get more context in this installment again with the Bride in Black. It's the entity that haunts Elise. She basically changed the target of Josh, saving him from the Bride in Black, and made her the target instead, and now she kind of lives with it. I don't think she intended to do that necessarily, but that's kind of why she talked about wanting to hang up the coat, or hang up the whatever you want to say, for not wanting to do readings and stuff anymore, or like go into the further or anything like that. She wanted to retire that. Hang up the Ouija board. Yeah. There we go. Rather than hang up the cleats. I was trying to think of something. Hang up the metronome. I don't know. Whatever. But I liked that part of this movie. It gave us more context as to her history, and I liked learning more about Elise. So I do like that aspect of this. Again, the main thing for me that just took me too much out of this movie was the acting, and I think the writing and the dialogue was a little bit forced in a lot of cases. So that's what my biggest critiques are for this installment. But do you have anything to add to it? You said 8.3? 8.3. Okay. There was just a few things that it did better than the second, in my opinion. One thing is it expanded on the story rather than just kind of beating around the bush and like just adding to things that we already kind of don't need to know. Like, to be fair, the Bride in Black story made the Bride in Black a lot less scary. The second one basically destroyed the character and kind of almost made her like empathetic, which is, I find, fucking stupid. She kills people, whatever.
and she was forced to do it by her mother, yet her mother Parker Crane's mother was dead. I don't know. In comparison, I feel like the other entity was just more scary. Like, they kind of destroy the bride in black in the second movie in comparison to the first. But we won't move on to the first one quite yet, unless this is your number 4, is it?
No. My number 4, my number 4 is Insidious: The Red Door, the newest installment. Mm-hmm. I rated it 6.5 out of 10, C tier. I thought it was an okay continuation from the first 2 installments. I liked seeing Dalton, in college age, and the tension between him and Josh was done very well, and it was believable. Mm-hmm. That was not my favorite part of the movie, but I liked that part of the movie, that dynamic they had. It was believable, and it was just entertaining in that sense. I don't want to spoil too much of this movie in saying this, because I don't even think we did a spoiler alert, actually.
Spoilers.
Yeah, spoiler alert if you didn't catch that in the beginning. I think some of the stuff they were going for was a bit convoluted, a bit far-fetched. It didn't really make a ton of sense when you stop and ask questions. For example, like why Dalton can go back in time and interact with events that we've already seen play out in different movies, and somehow it changes the way they play out. For example, I think it's Insidious 2, Elise saves Josh or something. Elise stops Josh from harming his family when he's, possessed or whatever by the entity. And then we see that exact same scene playing out in this one, but instead of Elise, it's now Dalton stopping Josh. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, why are they changing these events now?
I don't know.
But, so that's just something that, makes me stop and think, why are they doing that? I liked the way they interacted with the past in some cases, but then in other cases, like that one, they changed the story. They just retconned a little piece of it. And I'm like, well, what was the point of that? You could have done it a different way. Whatever. I did like seeing the flashbacks, just to expand on that, I guess. Even if it doesn't make sense at times. And another thing that I didn't care for all that much was Chris as a character. I kind of felt she was a little bit much at times. I understand she was supposed to be the comic relief, but some of the stuff she did was just kind of forced, in my opinion. Didn't feel natural. Yeah. I know she was supposed to be a weirdo and stuff, and an outcast in a way. I get what they were going for, but again, just some of the things she said, just nobody would say that.
I guess it is worth mentioning that this is my number 3.
Okay, so we're just going in order now.
Except just probably one of them is just knocked down and then... Yeah.
Right. But what do you got to say about this one? What's your rating on it?
My rating's pretty damn good. You're going to be upset.
I'm not upset. I don't give a shit.
It's
all subjective.
9.4.
Holy fuck. Okay, you really like this franchise.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I'm a big fan of the Insidious franchise, and I'm not sure if it's just the aesthetic or the nostalgia factor for the first time.
I think nostalgia plays a factor for me.
Yeah, certainly. So anyways...
In some cases.
Mm-hmm. I had a lot of fun in the theater. I guess our theater experience is another thing to talk about. I don't know what kind of mother brings their children into a movie theater, and I don't mean 12-year-olds. I mean probably between the ages of 5 and 10, minimum.
Yeah.
So we just see this mother bring their children to the theater, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna go fucking poorly, and they're gonna be scarred for life. And we see it probably a third of the way in after
some jump scares.
After some jump scares,
see the demons or whatever,
and then you just see one of the ones oh yeah, he's not coming back into the theater.
Yeah, well they walked out because they were scared.
They walked out because who would have thought the children probably wanted to see Mario movie, and mom was just now we're seeing Insidious: The Red Door.
Yeah, they came back, and then they're like, yeah, he doesn't want to come back in. So then the whole family got up and left. And
at least they left.
She didn't get to see the rest of the movie, and I mean, good on her for not just abandoning the kids, but yeah, maybe shouldn't have brought them in the first place. But
eyesight's 20/20, but I mean, is she blind?
I don't know. I mean, Insidious, it's in terms of gore and shit, there's nothing there, right? Mm-hmm. So you're just talking about ghosts. It's all just like jump scares and stuff. So you might suspect that it's not bad for a kid, or like maybe a good one to start with. But kids, especially at a young age like that, are very susceptible to like paranormal stuff.
They need something like Jurassic Park.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, Jurassic Park wouldn't be like bad. Even Jurassic Park could scare some children for sure.
Well, yeah, of course. Yeah. But anyways, I guess one last point for me, and I'll let you talk more about it if you have more points. I like that they went more into the further with this one. At least in my eyes, I thought they went more but returned back into the further. Like in some of the ones after the first and second, they kind of didn't go into the further as much, or like they, we didn't see as much of the further. But in this one, they kind of brought it back, and we got to see it a lot more in the movie. And I like that because I really like the further, and I think it's a pretty unique space that is what the Insidious franchise focuses on, and not a lot of movies focus on it in this way, I guess. And I don't know, it's just unique, I guess, in my opinion. There's similar settings, I guess, in horror in general, but this one is, I don't know, it stands out a bit for me.
Yeah. The setting alone, the further, they went into it quite a bit. They were able to, especially Dalton was able to explore it a lot more. The main thing is it was a focal point. Dalton basically came and went into the further at will, so that was a lot more unique to see in comparison to, there was some movies where it's like a big climax where they're gonna go into the further. I mean, not that didn't happen in the movie, it's just that the further was just like a common place in the movie for certain. So I like that they included the further and they were able to like reach to the other side, and I'm curious to what it shows for Dalton Lambert in the future if they do happen to expand upon other installments.
Yeah, who knows?
I like the thought of him just slowly uncovering his trauma to realize that his dad tried to kill him in the past.
Yeah, they did that really well.
I think that was really neat, and that's one question that I have. Like, is that why his relationship's so like torn with his dad? Is because of all that untapped trauma of him trying to kill him,
and he just doesn't remember it. It's just like
he doesn't remember it, so
suppressed.
It's suppressed, and he subconsciously just has like an anger for his dad.
Yeah.
I think the character of Patrick Wilson, Josh Lambert, was played pretty well,
as usual.
Yeah. You got some thoughts of his past and how he got his powers, so you can kind of see the same things for Dalton and how that was passed on, and even for Elise. So my thoughts are how in the fourth one, Elise's mother really Elise's mother had like almost like complete acceptance of her powers. Like, yeah, your powers are real, you have a gift. Your dad doesn't believe in your gift, though. So, like, maybe she has ancestors, or maybe even Elise's mom herself can see into the further and all that.
Right.
But anyways, going back onto the character of Josh Lambert, I think it was played pretty well, especially with him kind of going through a lot of shit, such as the divorce, his son hating him. So he's like, I've got to get some help.
Right.
So he tries to get his help, and then he starts seeing a lot more shit too, and then he realizes something isn't right. And then he goes back to his wife, or I guess ex-wife, and tries to figure out what the fuck's wrong with him.
Yeah.
Save his son, all this. I think it was a good build-up and a good payoff, which is really weird because we knew how the whole thing was kind of going to go down, but I feel like they did it in a fairly tasteful way.
Yeah, that's a good assessment. Anything else to add on the Red Door? I don't have much else to say for it.
I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, sure. So that was your number 3. I guess I'll go to my number 3 then. Which might be your number 2. It's going to be your number 2.
It's going to be my number 2.
It's Insidious: The Last Key, the 4th installment. For me, I rated it 7 out of 10, B tier. Before you go into it, because you liked it more, I'll go through some of my points. So my favorite part about it was the focus on Elise's childhood and her history with her family and stuff. The scenes where she was a child getting abused by her father, I thought were pretty gut-wrenching at times, where she's getting beaten, and then you see her as her old age. She's got like scars on her back from being beaten and stuff, so it's like it kind of hits hard in that sense. I think I have a sort of soft spot when I see child abuse on a horror movie. I'm like, oh, that's pretty fucking brutal, pretty disturbing. So yeah, I empathized with her, felt bad for Elise and how she got beaten, and she was seeing ghosts. She wasn't making that up, but her dad believed that she was just telling stories like a kid does, you know? Mm-hmm. But she was actually living through this horror in real life, and then also getting beaten for living through that horror. So I like that aspect. I did think it was the best part of the movie was seeing Elise in her trauma with her family and childhood. I do think that it kind of was lacking in scares, though. There wasn't a lot of entities that we saw. They were few and far between. The main focus was on the key face demon or whatever, which I actually really liked him as an entity. Him, her, it. I really liked that entity. But I'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, the scares, I felt like it was lacking in the scares a bit. Like, even the jump scares, like our drinking game we talked about, it was like half the amount of some of the other ones. So they didn't focus too much on that, which when I'm watching an Insidious movie, I kind of want to see that. That's just a minor critique of this one, though. The random reveal of the girl in the basement was real and not an entity. Mm-hmm. Like, that was shocking to me when I watched it the first time, and it did kind of feel a little weird and out of place, but I didn't hate it, and I just thought it was kind of random. Mm-hmm. And why would that guy invite these ghost hunters into his home when he knows that this girl's trapped down there? Like, they're probably gonna find it. It's like, it's just a stupid move on his part.
It's just like two things. So the main thing is the demon wanted him to contact Elise just so Elise would come back, because Elise can open doors.
Yes, the demon. Yes, for sure. And I guess that's the thing. The demon can control the people or whatever. That's the whole point, right? So yeah, I guess that's why it's just that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But I did think, or it also led to Elise's mom actually being alive and not dying the way that Elise thought. She didn't actually die when she hung herself or whatever. So that was, again, a nice touch that I liked in this movie. And it kind of focused on the real life horrors rather than the entities, and that's where the scares come from in this movie, rather than the supernatural horror. I guess
that's one of the main reasons that I like this movie a little bit more. It's, I think, a 9.5 for me. Okay. Realism.
It's very very realistic,
and you don't really think about that with an Insidious movie of all things, right?
And I think that's partially why it's a little bit lower for me. It's because it doesn't have the Insidious vibe as much, but it's still an enjoyable movie.
It's like a middle ground for an Insidious movie, and it has like a completely different like atmosphere.
For sure.
I mean, I like that a lot in franchises where they kind of try something different, such as I think of Paranormal Activity, who Oren Pele's the producer for Insidious as well. Some of his best movies, in my opinion, is Next of Kin. I think that's a very unpopular opinion, but also The Marked Ones, which they went for a completely different vibe, and not really a home setting, but like found footage with just friends graduating high school in a with a Mexican community. Like, I thought that was really interesting and a change of pace. So it's like a breath of fresh air for some of those movies. Yeah. Which is what I thought for this. If it was the same concept beat to death. I mean, there's like still some ghosts and demons and shit like that. However, they did add a lot to it with that. Yeah. Such as real horror for obviously the dad, the guy that moved into the house. And it shows that not everything has to be supernatural to be scary, in like horror movies especially, even in the Insidious franchise. Other things that I liked about the movie a lot is that there was a lot of twists and turns that I didn't really expect coming. You mentioned how the girl was just tied up in the basement, or the girl was locked up in the basement, and even the girl in Elise's past wasn't alive. One of the biggest twists I thought in the movie was how to get rid of a villain is just by fucking killing him. Which Specs just flat out kills a guy, self-defense. But
well,
that was unexpected. Sure. He has a gun. He's like, oh, what is he gonna do to get them out of the house or something like that? No, he just fucking kills them. Which I'm just like, wow. That was just a shocking moment, especially since he's probably the least powerful person on the team.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, he's the one that writes. Tucker's the guy that does like all the tech shit, and he's just kind of the guy who writes and has glasses.
Yeah.
And like a little bit less nerdy than Tucker, but he murders a guy in cold blood. Tucker's the strong guy too. He's like the nerdy little scrawny kid. And
Specs.
Specs.
Yeah.
He goes against a guy with a gun and wins, which is fucking neat.
Yeah.
I did not expect that outcome at all when I first watched him. Like,
sure.
oh, yeah, he just fucking killed him. I mean, yeah, he can do that, but this early on in the movie, like what's to add?
Yeah.
I was just like, where does the movie go from there? I don't know. It was just a hard stop for the movie. It was like, it kind of caught me off guard, and it was a fun scene because I didn't expect the movie to go that way. Just because of common tropes. It's like, oh, the killer survives till the end, and yada yada yada, and it has to be supernatural, where he just kills a guy and demon haunting done. Yeah. I mean, technically, but
yeah. So I guess I don't have much more to add on it, other than the one point I wanted to circle back to about the entity. I really liked the key face demon as an entity. I thought it was a unique portrayal of an entity, I guess, in the Insidious franchise. I thought it was a pretty clever addition where, you know, his fingers were keys, so then he would just like stick it in their throat and just turn off their voice box or whatever. Yeah. I liked that touch because then they're just screaming in silence, which was pretty effective in my eyes. And that stuff like that the demon, we don't get to see a lot of how it looks. We do a little bit more in the end, but throughout the beginning you're like kind of wondering and left in anticipation on, okay, what does this demon actually look like? And then when they reveal it, I thought it looked pretty creepy and like it was executed well, I guess. And that's something I really liked from this installment, was the actual entity. Even if they didn't put as much focus on the entities in this movie, when they did, I thought it was done well. And yeah, so that's my thoughts on the third installment.
So I want to touch on the whistle a little bit. So it's a very common thing, especially in like horror movies, where it's kind of like Shakespeare syndrome, where if you see a gun in the first act, you know it's going to be there in the third act. Yeah. Where you see the whistle and you know it's basically there to be like, oh, jump scare scene, you're going to have somebody blowing a whistle. But I liked how that was like kind of attached to the family in a way as well. Just summoning the mom, the dad's like heirloom almost, as you'd probably call it.
Yeah.
I think that was interesting in the way that they kind of did it and like integrated into the story more tastefully.
Yeah, I do like that as well. It was something unique that was introduced in this installment, was the whistle.
And then Elise's brother, I'm not really sure how to feel about that. Like, if there was anything that you say, people are like, oh, I like the relationship. And it's like,
it was pretty minor.
I was going to say, I honestly couldn't really care much about it.
It was pretty
it was
minor.
just a way to bring more characters in to kind of make the plot progress, to be honest. In my opinion, anyways.
I think so, too. And even, like, Elise's nieces. Yeah. Rhyme. Wow. Anyways, like, even those characters being added in was like, take it or leave it. It was pretty whatever. Like, you didn't need them, I guess. You could have done it in a different way. But I didn't like or hate any of those characters, I guess. They were just kind of there. It
was there for what's his name, for Tucker and Specs to ogle over.
That's right, the comic relief, I guess. And that's something I didn't really like in this one, was the comic relief. Usually I'm okay with Tucker and Specs, especially in the first one. I think it was done almost perfectly.
It was done really well in the first one.
But as the franchise went on, I felt like they kind of went harder with them and tried to be funny, whereas they didn't need to try to be funny. They could have just been themselves, like, as characters. Yeah. And I think that's more effective for them.
Yeah. It got to the point where it was almost just like, call the police as opposed to call Elise.
Exactly.
Let's see how that round too.
Elise's nieces polices.
And Elise's nieces need police.
Okay, well, do you have anything else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, good. Let's move on to Insidious 2.
Yeah, so Insidious 2 is my number 2. Ranked 7.5 out of 10, B tier. Again, you ranked it better than me, so you seem to like it more than me. Again, this whole franchise, I think you like more than me.
I mean, due to rankings,
clearly.
Yeah.
I do think this is a pretty decent sequel. It did provide context from the past Again, like I said with Insidious 5 about going back in the past, I don't know why time travel is even possible in the further. They don't really ever explain that or touch on that. So that's something that kind of like takes me out of it in a little bit, and that's maybe why some of my rankings are lower, because I can't come up with a logical explanation.
It's kind of a weird space. It's like limbo, where it's like no place like in heaven and hell, and like as it doesn't really like follow the rules of time so much as it does the rules of space as well.
Yeah, and that's just it. Like, it doesn't follow the rules that I know of, and that's, I guess, part of what takes me out, because I still try to wrap my head around it. Like, okay, how can he go back? Even if he can go back in time, how can he change the events that played out that we already saw? And like, whatever. It's a minor thing, but it still takes it out for me personally.
The further, I think, is a very interesting place to begin with.
I do agree.
Just because you're like looking in pure blackness, and then somebody's just like, hey, what's that over there? It's like, hey, there's a house over there. And just a house kind of spawns.
Yeah, true. There's random things like that. But anyways, you mentioned about Parker Crane, and you didn't like the expansion of the Bride in Black and the more context they provided with that. And that's actually something I did like about the second one that they provided. Rather than just like doing the same, in a haunted house with spooky ghosts. I mean, they're not in a haunted house. They are themselves haunted, but you know what I mean? I like that they actually added more context to Parker Crane as the Bride in Black, and like, got to see his victims and how they were affected kind of, and got to see why Parker Crane even turned out to be the Bride in Black, and why he, like his mom, like you mentioned, was the reason for that. And I liked seeing all that stuff, and I thought that it was a good way to continue on from the first one, a direct continuation, really. And I do like that they were in the further so often, because it allowed Elise to be there more. And that's the way they brought her back after, spoiler alert, I guess, she died in the first one right at the end, which allowed her to have a bigger role in this movie rather than just being a character that died. I think this was a good way for them to include her in the story, I guess. I really wish they didn't kill her off in the first one, but I guess they were going for a big shock, and it worked.
They were going for a big shock ending. They didn't know how well the movie would do.
Yeah. Anyways, couple points before we move on to our number one, which is obvious at this point, and I think it was obvious from the beginning, but you mentioned Carl. I did like Carl. I thought he was a pretty decent substitute for Elise's place as the, reader, the guy doing the seances, whatever, the guy who's trying to connect with the dead. And I like the way they use the dice, even if it is a little gimmicky. I liked they tried something new with the dice, trying to reach out to them. One last critique that I have is that it was way too obvious that Josh wasn't really Josh.
Oh yeah.
Like right from the beginning.
Oh yeah, right from the beginning, like everybody knew.
It was even before you know the movie.
Well, it was teased in basically the first movie.
Yeah, but I mean, yes, it was.
You'd have to be an idiot.
Yeah, I know, but I just wish they went a little bit more subtle from the beginning rather than right out the gate. I just think it would have been more effective if they started very subtle and then kind of built up. They did build up more and more as the movie went on, but they started way too obvious, I think. And then built up to a reveal that wasn't even shocking because of that. So I do think they could have done that a little bit better.
I will say in this movie, though, I think Patrick Wilson, in this installment in particular, was probably one of the best acting performances of the series, that, especially excluding Elise for sure.
Oh, yeah. And
excluding Elise, it's probably the best acting of the whole series.
That is worth mentioning, that I do like Josh Lambert. The way that he's like not being himself, acting out weirdly. Yeah, I like that part of this movie.
He's basically playing two characters to perfection, and you really believe that it's not like Patrick Wilson just playing a role. You believe that it's somebody possessed, right?
Yes, for sure. Yeah. So that is something that I did like in this movie as well.
I will expand a little bit just before we move on why I didn't like the Bride in Black. Like, yes, it would have been good if it was just like an old man in a suit killing people. I love that idea, but when you try to like break down like the methodology of like the serial killer itself, it kind of gets like less spooky, and it's just, I'm just a poor boy, no mother loves me, and I don't know, it just makes it a lot less spooky when you basically see this vulnerable like young child. It's like you almost trying to feel bad for Parker Crane in a way. where Parker Crane's the guy that murdered multiple people, strangled the shit out of them. I feel like Parker Crane should be there to be an antagonist, not to be sympathized with. They try to make that a lot in the movie, especially him fighting with his mother. I don't want to kill people. Yeah, you gotta kill people. And they just try to take away a lot of the punch from, again, the ending of the last movie.
Yeah, that's a fair way to look at it. I don't personally look at it that way. I think I don't empathize with Parker Crane for doing what he did. I know what you're getting at. They try to do that by making his mom the bad guy, forcing him to go and do this stuff. I don't necessarily feel bad because of what he's doing. Like, I don't know. I guess I just don't think of him in that sense. I just like seeing the history of where it was originated, I guess. The origin story, I guess I'll say. I like seeing that aspect. So for me, I guess it just worked better for me than it did for you in that context. So it's, to each their own, right? Anything else before we talk about our number one spot?
We can talk about our number one spot.
All right. So Insidious. What's your rating?
Insidious is 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. I figured so. Yeah. Mine's 8.5 out of 10. A tier. I personally don't think it's an S tier movie upon rewatching it. Even though I've seen it so many fucking times. Like maybe that plays a part in it.
How many times do you think you've seen Insidious?
Probably not as much as you, but I don't know. I've seen it a lot.
I'd say I've seen it probably like 8 times or so, give or take. I've seen it a good chunk.
Yeah, it's probably closer to 5 for me, to be honest. Because I don't tend to rewatch movies that often. This is one that I've seen more, and I'll touch on why in a bit, I guess. Do you want to start? I talked about number 2 for a while.
God damn, how do I start with Insidious? So the way that Insidious starts is it brings us into like a brand new atmosphere that kind of hasn't been seen in movies for like a long period of time. It was one of the movies that, in my opinion, reignitioned jump scares.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, take it, leave it.
Popularized them a lot more. Did them effectively too.
Yeah, that's the main thing. Did it effectively. Where it's not just like, oh, there's a ghost that's moving in Paranormal Activity.
Yeah.
It doesn't really work as well, especially if it's Paranormal Activity, right? People think of that in the same way. Like, they're going to think of Paranormal Activity in 20 years. This is how we think of the Blair Witch now. Where we think the Blair Witch isn't scary at all. Where I think people can definitely think Insidious is scary in 20 years from now.
Yeah.
Just the atmosphere and just the sun being haunted, I think, is a unique take on the horror genre as a whole. The entities and everything trying to reach out from the other side. It's basically like a new plane of existence that's in between heaven and hell, especially more or less leaning towards hell.
Well, yeah, it's basically all these trapped souls that are... There's good ones and bad ones. So the good ones are there and they're trying just basically to survive, I guess, for lack of a better term. And then the bad ones are basically trying to repossess a living, pure soul as their own and trying to, like, take over a clean soul. So that's what these bad demons are there doing. And they do a good job of, portraying that, especially in the first one.
Yep. Also, like a lot of the lead-in, I liked Renee's character, the acting in that as well. Josh's character, the acting's done really well. Callie's crying, phenomenal.
I mean, make a baby cry.
How do you do that?
Yeah.
But anyways, I thought a lot of things were done super magnificently well in this installment of, I guess, the James Wan saga franchises.
Yeah. So, for me, this movie, it's one of the earlier horror movies that I guess I watched and loved before really getting into horror, like full force, I guess.
Yeah.
It was one that I watched fairly young. I don't know, how old were we in 2010?
Probably would have been like, give or take
14,
15.
So like, I had already watched some horror movies and liked them, but I never really wasn't full force in them, you know what I mean? So it was one of those early ones that kind of impacted me in that way, so it kind of holds a special place in my mind because of that, and it is very nostalgic for me, so I really like it in that sense. And I think I was just the perfect target audience when this got released.
Oh yeah.
Like that age, right? 15-year-old, this is a perfect movie for a young teenager in their adolescence. So I do consider it one of my favorite modern horror movies simply because of how I felt first watch.
At an 8.5.
At an 8.5, yes. There's still criticisms I have about it. Like I said, especially on rewatches. But just to expand, I guess, jump scares are super effective, like you mentioned, and they actually spooked me. Even on rewatches, they kind of spooked me out, but especially on the first one, they spooked me. I really enjoy The Further. We talked about that, and like using astral projection is a great angle, since sleep paralysis is such a like genuine fear and phenomenon, I guess, that people experience in the real life, so they can kind of relate to The Further in that context. And I think that's a great way of exploring that, and they did it really well in the first installment and throughout the whole franchise, but especially in the first installment being the first time you see it, right? One criticism, I guess, is I wish they didn't kill off Elise in the end. I know why they did it. They were going for shock factor, and it was pretty shocking, and the jump scare was effective with it. The bride in black and Josh, was actually not Josh, and it was exposed through the camera. It explains why he doesn't like his picture taken, all of that. It all adds more context, and it's done effectively. It just makes it very hard
to get a sequel when you kill off the best character in the franchise in the first installment.
Exactly, and that's one of my criticisms for it. Again, they did it well for the first one, but it just made it harder for her to come back in the franchise, which I'm not sure if they intended to make this a franchise or a one-off. I don't know. It was 3 or 4 years in between the movies before the second one even came out,
give or take.
So yeah, I don't know what their intentions were. Maybe it was supposed to be a standalone, and just due to the success they decided to make another one. I don't know, but yeah, again, hindsight, right? We know.
Well, that's the other thing. Was it released in January? Was it one of those January I don't know, fuck it, whatever, we just toss it in theaters, see how it does?
Yeah,
and it just kind of exploded. I'm pretty sure it was released in January. I could be wrong,
but yeah. So another thing, one last criticism that I want to point out, and this for me drops it down a decent amount, I guess. It's reason why it's not S tier, I think. It's the lipstick face demon. I love the lipstick face demon.
It's just Darth Maul.
But yeah, once you get to see him close up and you see all of his features, it's just Darth Maul, and it's just a guy wearing makeup. Yeah. That's the part that I really, really don't like about Insidious, the first one. And to me,
the demon's not really scary when you see it.
Exactly. Sure. I think they do such a good job of you see his silhouette, you see maybe his hooves or whatever.
It's the fact that you see pictures of it, Dalton's drawings, that's creepy for a kid to draw, and then you see Specs drawings, holy fuck, that's terrifying.
It's intense. Exactly.
When it's in the shadows and drawn ominously. It's horrifying.
And that's
when you see it in full, it's not.
That's exactly why.
Which is all right.
That's exactly why it drops it down to A tier instead of S tier for me. Because of the lipstick face demon and the details that they don't need to show.
Yeah.
And like you said, I think when he's shown in the shadows or in drawings, he's just creepy. Way more scary in that form, or when we don't see him, he's just lurking in the shadows. And I wish they kept that more so for the entire movie. Or maybe just when you expose him, don't fully light his face up, don't show us the entirety of every little detail. You could fucking see the guy, he's just wearing makeup. It's okay, well, fuck, now you just kind of ruined it.
Yeah, well, and it's gone.
Yeah, so yeah, that's my main criticism for the first one. Like I said, I still hold it in regard as one of my favorite modern horror movies, mainly for the nostalgic factor. I do think the reason why I put it as 8.5 instead of 9 or 9.5 or something is the criticisms I already gave it, and just when I watch other movies, I enjoy them more now, I guess, because I've seen so much more, right? But if you asked me this when I first watched it, even 10 years ago, I would probably say this is my favorite horror movie, period. But now I wouldn't say that.
Yeah, it's very influential.
It's very nostalgic for me, and that's why I love it. But I just couldn't, in my best interest, put it in S tier because of the criticisms. I think weigh it down a little bit for me, but it's still a great movie.
one of the big things I like is just like kind of the mysterious coma. You knew it had to do with something later on in the plot, which was revealed to be just Dalton and the Further, which, I mean, a lot of it doesn't make sense, just especially in the way they're describing it to somebody such as the audience who doesn't know what the fuck you're talking about, because you're describing an absolutely foreign concept to us.
Yeah.
But I also like how they tried moving houses, like, oh, our house is haunted. Just moved into a house. Can't be a coincidence. It looks like it just was a coincidence.
Yeah.
And Tiptoe Through the Tulips is now synonymous with, like, a just freaky song.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Which is...
It always had that vibe, but this one, like, set it in stone.
Set it over the edge,
yeah,
for sure. The way that it built up, and obviously Tucker and Specs, their comedy throughout was... just enough. Just enough to actually be funny but serious at the same time. Like, you see them in the scene with Elise and like all of like the flashing pictures and the gas mask. Like, that's a horrifying scene, and they're just like right away what they're probably going for in a movie is just like, what's gonna be scary? Like James Wan Leigh-Whannell's just sitting in a room, is like, what's gonna be scary? Gas mask, tubes, flashing lights. That's gonna horrify the shit out of some people. And I love how they just incorporated in the movie, there's just gonna be a lot of things that don't make sense, just don't question it, shut up. And it was scary. Just a girl in a gas mask. You can hear from the other side. It was spooky as hell, though. Just the gas mask, you felt really constricted throughout the movie. There was this weird bodyguard demon thing that was obsessed with Renee. And the child. And I don't know, there was just a lot going on.
There was a lot of different entities.
There was a lot of unsettling things in the movie, such as, what's his name? Foster saying, I don't like when Dalton moves around at night. There was just a lot of, like, very subtle unsettling things. Such as the handprint and the tiptoe through the window.
The little kid that we see running around in the halls.
It just bursts out of the closet, scares the shit out of Renee. But I think it does a lot of things really well, especially for the time period that it was placed in. I think it was probably, again, if I was a kid, I think it would have been, after my first rewatch, I thought it was probably the best thing since sliced bread. It was, I think, at the time, I'm not sure if it's changed. I really haven't, like, questioned myself. Probably, it's not my favorite horror movie as of now, I think, just since I think a lot of other things stick a lot better with me. But it definitely made a big impact on me watching horror in general.
It definitely, like, not introduced me to horror, but it helped, like, further push me into horror, I guess.
Definitely, it led me down a path of no return for horror.
Definitely. So, I guess before we close this off, like, what are your overall thoughts on the Insidious franchise as a whole? Not just speaking on one movie in particular, but, like, what do you think the franchise does well? How do you just, like, hold it in your heart or mind or whatever? What is your overall thoughts, I guess?
I love it. I mean, it's really almost childish to say, but I'm still a fan of jump scares, especially if done correctly. And I feel like Insidious is one of the movies that does it very well. I'd say the franchise in general is probably top 3 minimum. Other things that compare to it, I'd say Sinister. Sinister has a really dark, eerie vibe to it. I think that's another one of my favorite horror movies, just for the purpose and, like, the backstory behind it. Same thing. Mr. Boogie's absolutely not terrifying at all.
Once you see him, I know. Same thing
for the lipstick demon. But I think it was done very immaculately. And did it need sequels? Certainly not.
No, it didn't.
It ruined, I think, the movie a lot more. If it was just left as a one-off, I think it would have been
higher ranked for me.
One of the top of the decade easily for a lot of people. But once you see all like the fucking other installments, it just kind of ruins the first one a little bit.
Because it gives you more context, and, like, especially in my opinion, the Elise thing, trying to bring her back through the sequels is challenging.
We're just gonna go in reverse.
Yeah, that's what they ended up having to do. But I think for me, the entirety of the franchise, in my opinion, like, all of the sequels to come after the first one are not as strong as the first one. And obviously, like, exactly, by far. So that's something that I think about when someone talks about this franchise. this whole franchise, you said at the beginning, is you think it's both of our favorites. It's not the franchise as a whole for me that's my favorite. It's just the first one. The rest of the movies I enjoy enough to watch, but I don't go find myself rewatching them.
Yeah.
Other than the first one, I've watched a handful of times. But apart from that, I haven't rewatched a lot of them.
I'm kind of surprised, to be in all honesty.
I mean,
because we both rewatched them at the same time, and I thought you'd like them just as much as myself, but I guess not.
I don't know what it is, to be honest, and I never found myself going to rewatch the other ones, even before rewatching them for our drinking games. But I never found myself. I think I've only seen the third and fourth one now twice, but once before.
Actually, no. I've seen the second one quite a bit too. Like I've seen the second one at least 4 times.
The second one I've seen twice, maybe, before the drinking game, and now maybe 3 times. But apart from that, like the first one I liked a lot. Obviously, a lot more than the rest of the franchise. One thing I do give this entire franchise credit for is like the tension amongst the families and like the real life horror that they do within the families themselves. I think they do very well throughout every single installment.
Yeah, it has a lot of good family drama.
Exactly the drama, like whether it's Dalton being in a coma or Elise dealing with her trauma or whatever it might be, there's always something that's happening in real life.
Yeah, well, like you even kind of see that in the third one where it's just Quinn's dad just you've got to take care of your brother. Why are you not helping the family? Where the dad basically drops like everything to take care of his daughter
or their dead mom
who almost died. And then the dead mom and things like that. All of the Insidious franchise does it, I think, extraordinarily well.
Yeah, and that's kind of thing I like about Insidious is they have that, and I like that they do that. It's not all about just supernatural shit. There's some real life horror involved, and I like when movies involve real life horror because it makes it more impactful, I think, in my opinion. And despite my rankings, I do enjoy the whole franchise, but it, like I said, it just isn't one that I go back to rewatch, so I couldn't rank it like super high for every movie, right? And yeah, I have my criticisms for each one, including the first one, which is why I didn't quite put it in S tier, but close. But yeah, overall, I do enjoy the franchise. It's just not my favorite, I guess. But yeah, do you have anything else you want to add before we close this out?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, it went a bit longer than I expected. We're over 45 minutes.
Yeah, we were just crushing it through the first 4 movies, and then we got to Insidious, like chapters, I guess the first and second place on our list, and then that took up probably 2/3 of the video.
Yeah, I guess we sped through quite a bit because a lot of ours lined up, so we were able to talk about it at the same time.
Yeah, that's kind of true too. Besides number 1 and our number 2 and our number 5, which were switched.
Flipped, yeah.
Which was kind of weird.
It is.
I guess not flipped, but like it was just like lower and then everything else.
Yeah, everything else
bumped up.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, if you're listening at this point, thank you for listening. It's a bit of a not long. It's not as long as our Terrifier discussion, but almost an hour. In like 10 minutes, it'd be an hour, I think. But yeah, in the meantime, thanks for watching. If you haven't watched our drinking games or our Taste of Horrors, where we made drinks inspired by the franchise, go check those out because yeah, we made a drinking game for every one of them.
Made some good ass drinks.
We have our next videos coming out, which is going to be it's Escape Room, not the one we've already covered on our channel back before we changed our format, but the Netflix. Is it a Netflix original?
I don't think it's a Netflix original. It's just an escape room movie on Netflix.
Yeah.
So we originally thought like we have to have a shitty movie in there somewhere.
Yeah.
And we're just like, we got to do this movie. So we had the drinks for it since like over a year at least. Like we've had it totaled for that long.
We just kept putting it off because
we didn't want to watch it.
I still haven't watched it in the time of this recording.
Tucker still hasn't watched it. But yeah, so that movie was such a long time ago. I'm gonna have to rewatch it because I haven't rewatched it in forever, which is unfortunate for sure.
Well, yeah, whatever.
Along with that, though, we're going to be releasing some drinks for not that escape room movie, but I guess rather all escape room movies.
Right. Yes, we're gonna be inspired just from escape room movies as a whole.
Yeah, so
not that one in particular.
So you can even do like an escape room drink. It doesn't necessarily have to be escape room horror movies, but we're going to do like escape room themed drinks.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think is a lot of it can have a lot of creativity along with it, but we'll see how it goes. I'm not too creative.
We'll see, yeah. But yeah, in the meantime, thank you for watching. If you made it this far, thank you. Let us know in the comments. I don't know, what's your favorite Insidious movie? What do you think of the whole franchise? Let us know in the comments below. But in the meantime, thanks for tuning in, and this is us saying, cheers to fears.